everyone, it's Roger and James here from the What's on Disney Plus podcast. In this bonus retro review, we're going to be taking a look at the Prince of Persia Sands of Time movie, which recently got added to Disney Plus in the United States. And it was one of those movies that neither one of us had seen and thought it was like, so we say it's a retro review, but we kind of watched it for the first time, and especially in the middle of the current situation, anything that we've not seen is brand new. So therefore, there's a lot of benefits. But if you haven't already done so, make sure you do check us out over at whatsondisneyplus.com to keep up with all your latest news. But also, if you haven't already done so, we have a Patreon as well, where you get access to videos like this a week earlier than everybody else, as a little special sort of extra bonus, and also they get an exclusive weekly video as well. So a big thank you to all of our patrons this month, including Jacob, Sarah, Joshua, The Juice, What's on Netflix, Andrew, Julie, and Lauren. So again, thank you for all of your support. Now let's jump into Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. James, what did you think of it?
It was pretty boring, actually, which is not the reaction I was expecting to get out of it. It's a Jerry Bruckheimer movie. It's action focused, or his production company. He wasn't involved in the directing, but yeah, it was just kind of boring.
It's kind of one of those things of, it was the first half of the movie. I thought I was just watching Aladdin.
Yes,
the new version of it. Yeah,
there was a lot of that.
It was like, okay, so he's going to steal an apple, and he's going to run through, and he's going to jump around, and he's going to do some parkour, and I'm like, I just need that song going in the background, and we have here Aladdin going on, because it was almost like, and now in some ways, obviously this movie came out obviously like nearly 20 years after the animated movie, so whether or not they took some inspirations from that one, but obviously now with the live action Aladdin, obviously that was filmed like 8-9 years later. It's kind of like thing of like going, well, the live action version did come after this. So it's like, did they watch this movie first? Prince of Persia was a really weird movie, but I don't know if it could have done with a bit of trimming. It could have done with a little time taken off of it. But I definitely found like the first half I was enjoying it. As it kind of moved into more like weird territory, it kind of got less and less inclined with it. But yeah, the thing is, have you ever played the Prince of Persia video games?
I have. Not the really old ones. I played them in the Xbox 360 era. So they're more like Assassin's Creed game, but with less of an action focus. And I enjoyed them well enough. It's not a franchise that I'm like, oh, why is there not another Prince of Persia coming out on the Xbox One Series X 2 5 whatever the PlayStation 5, we'll go with that one. So I'm not disappointed the franchise isn't currently active, but at the same time, if one came out, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll give that a try.
See, I grew up playing the original Prince of Persia on the PC way back in the 80s and early 90s, and you used to get the character and you used to try and get him across the thing, and so I played a lot. So to me, I am old school, and Prince of Persia on my mind instantly goes back to the original game, which I used to play. And if you could get past the first level or two, that was pretty hard in itself. I have played a few of the more modern ones with the side running and all the rest of it. But compared to Assassin's Creed, it always felt like that was a much better version of what they were trying to do. There was one particular scene in the movie where he climbs to the top of a tower, stands there at the end, poses, and then jumps into and then jumps off of it, and was like, this is what happens in every single Assassin's Creed game that ever exists, because it was a shot for shot. It was like, am I watching Assassin's Creed? Which reminds me, I need to watch that movie.
No, you don't. You really don't. Really quick tangent. I went into the Assassin's Creed movie with zero expectations. Like I just want a good fight in this movie, and it failed spectacularly at even that. No, you don't need to watch the Assassin's Creed. Just play the game instead. But yeah, if you had superimposed that eagle scream on that sequence, I'd been like, oh yeah, this is totally Assassin's Creed. Yeah.
There was also other things as well with it. The whole kind of press the button and it kind of does the Sands of Time. It kind of got to the thing like, I'd like to have had more of that kind of, obviously they had to limit how much they used it. But that kind of was obviously the main thing they were going for. But I would have liked a little bit more of the actual being able to do that.
It's clear that they spent their entire budget on the few times they did do that. Like, because it's a really cool sequence with like Gyllenhaal turning like all like ashen and lava cracks coming through, and also it looks great. And then all the other special effects movie just look awful. Like those snakes coming out of the ground is like, this is pathetic.
Yeah, it's kind of funny as well, because I looked at this. I'm like looking at this and going, like, okay, this and John Carter, and kind of this whole era of them kind of having way too big a budget for where they're almost that kind of feeling of them kind of coasting a little bit. They've got these ideas and they know how to do this stuff, but they maybe necessarily didn't spend enough time getting the script and the characters right. As far as Jake goes, is like, I'll be honest, I've never really been a huge, like, I don't really know much about him at all. I think the only thing I'd ever really seen him in really was Spider-Man Far From Home. He's never been a character, an actor that I've followed. So I watched him this and I was a bit like, okay, okay. And then it's like, I was hoping as well of, like, I think, is it Gemma Atkinson? It was Arlington. Oh, it's just so bland. This is like, I'm English. Yeah, it's just like, I'm English, and it's just like, oh, really? So are we still doing this kind of? You're not quite Keira Knightley, but you're just like, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, let's talk about that, because this movie definitely had Pirates of the Caribbean vibes to it.
Yeah.
But it lacked the Jack Sparrow character.
Yeah.
Which meant we are watching a movie that is just Will and Elizabeth, and there's a reason why you need the Jack Sparrow character. Now, Alfred Molina plays a bandit character who's obsessed with ostriches for some reason. You can tell he tried. He definitely tried to inject personality into it, though it was more Barbossa than Sparrow. He tried so hard, but he had nothing to work with on this. There were definitely parts of it. You're talking about it, Assassin's Creed and stuff like that. I'm like, there are parts of this where I'm like, you lifted this straight from Pirates of the Caribbean, but you forgot the Sparrow character.
Yeah. It's kind of like, it's that kind of weird thing of going, I know why, you can see why this was a paint by numbers sort of action movie. I think if you took the video game aspect out, because the trouble with adapting video games is generally with video games, while the story keeps you moving along, most of it is just a way of kind of extending how long you're playing for. The playing part is the bit that you enjoy. The cutscenes are the bit that you just kind of sit through. And it's a kind of weird thing of going, okay, I see where you're going. The fight scenes all look, that all looked good, and him jumping around and climbing around. It felt like they did take that part of the video game character and bring it to real life. I did appreciate the fact that they had him jumping around like the character much more regularly, and it did look natural in some ways because of the whole. I mean, I see people doing parkour on the seafront every day. People jumping over. I'm kind of used to that as in my day-to-day life, that people do that. So it's people jumping over fences and stuff. It's people and kids doing that all the time. So that doesn't bother me at all. But I think the whole thing of, like, I think, was it Ben Kingsley just playing the most generic. I mean, he could have been the Mandarin. He was so so vanilla. I mean, you just knew he was a bad guy the second you saw him on screen.
Oh yeah, no, I knew the moment he was on screen. I'm like, that's the bad guy. It's not even that it's Ben Kingsley. It's just the way he's looking at things. Now, he did a decent job with the character. He emotes really well. You can see that there's more than just like him reading lines and stuff like that. Yeah. But yeah, he didn't have much to work with. But there was that one scene. The king is talking about, oh yes, the bonds of brotherly love, and you're just like, oh my God, you are so getting stabbed in the back by Ben Kingsley.
I did like the way they killed him off, actually. I thought that was quite impressive. I thought that was a nice touch. The whole thing with the assistant kind of that turned into like animals and like shoot, it was a bit weird. And then suddenly we had this other guy that could shoot loads of weapons, and they had that whole standoff. It was like, okay, I got to the end of it and I was like, this was really middle of the road. This was such a generic run of the mill, but I did enjoy it. I'll be honest. I did get to the end of it. I didn't sit there and go, wow, that was a waste of 2 hours. I got to the end and went, okay, that's cool. I'm never going to watch it again, but I'm glad I watched it. And especially, like you say, right now, where we've not really had a lot of new movies and everything's been drying up, kind of going back and finding these lost movies that we've not watched before, kind of is fresh. We watched Atlantis recently. It feels like I'm kind of filling in the gaps a bit of my, and I'm like, this is perfectly fine. I'm glad I watched it. I think there's a lot better than this. I'm still not entirely sure of the casting of anybody in this movie. It seemed a bit odd all the way around. I think as well, again, Aladdin, just kind of the newer version of Aladdin just did a much better job of the casting. I think it is, setting it in Persia and all the rest of it, and then just having, an American and an English girl, it just like, and then I don't know, it just was very strange. And even like the brothers and everybody, it was like, why are they all English?
Because it would never have sold if it didn't have Jake Gyllenhaal or a recognizable name, and then it didn't sell anyway. So good job. For me, like I wasn't offended that I watched it. I didn't want that basically 2 hours of my life back. I was like, oh man, this was the worst 2 hours of my life or anything like that. But at the same time, if I was given the option to go back, would you like to watch something else? I'm like, yeah, I probably would watch something else instead. It's not a horrible movie. It's kind of a boring movie. It does. Okay, I do actually have one real complaint about it, which was that it used slow-mo quite a bit, and not in the sequences like going back in time with the dagger. It would just pick random moments in the fight where like, oh, you know what this needs? This needs slow-mo. It's like, no, it doesn't. He's jumping off a cliff. Why do we need slow-mo for this? And it really disrupted the pace of the fights, which would have otherwise been acceptable. We're not talking about like Matrix or John Wick style fights here, but they would have at least been better if they hadn't been disrupted by random camera moves and shifts to slow motion.
Yeah.
And then there was that one guy you were talking about, like he's shooting like crossbow bolts out of his hand, or a Wolverine type thing. And like, I'm just sitting there like, the director just wanted guns so bad. He wanted to do a gunfight in this, and everyone's like, no, they didn't have guns. You can't do a gunfight. Well, make an auto crossbow on his arm. It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I've just been like looking to see like how this did originally when it came out, because it went on to be, it had a budget of 150 million. You can definitely tell it was an expensive movie. You could tell where the money went. It looks good, albeit for the majority of it. Pulled in 336 million at the box office. So generally, probably the time of advertising and stuff, looks like it made a profit. But generally, the critical response was it's been very average, doesn't offer much substance, and it's just a entertaining swashbuckler, but never really. And that's kind of like, yeah, very, very average and generic. That's not necessarily a good thing. You don't want that from a big blockbuster budget movie. But it's amazing how this is because obviously it came to Disney Plus in the US this past week. It was like why we decided to do it. But it's been on like Disney Plus and Disney Life for me for years. I've had access to this on Disney Life for years, and I never even fired it up. To be honest, I didn't even realize this was still a thing until I saw it advertised recently to come into Disney Plus. I'm like, oh yeah, and yeah, it was a solid movie, but it is a strange one.
It's solid enough. It's what you expect it to be. You got to set your expectations because it is a video game movie, and kind of keep that in mind. And I think that puts you in the right mind frame for what you're looking at here. I don't think anyone needs to rush out and see it. I don't think you need to necessarily even add it to your watch list. However, if you've got a weekend and you just want some mindless, emphasis on mindless action, decent looking people, both the males and the females in it, you could do worse, which is, I know, a huge ringing endorsement for it, but there you go.
You can watch it. All you could do worse.
I mean, honestly, I would probably be like, just watch the first Pirates of the Caribbean again.
Yeah. Or more importantly, just play the video game. Just play the video game. Yeah, it's kind of, what is it with video games that movies, they just don't seem to be able to kind of
I think you actually answered that earlier. It's games are driven by action. I mean, that's what a game means, right? So the narrative focus of it is generally background. The better ones have actual story content to them, but they're still driven by the gameplay loop rather than by the narrative loop. And trying to translate that into a movie just is really difficult.
Yeah, well, I always as well think, like with video games, that the journey is generally the bit that you're more interested in. It's like in say, for example, with like the Persia movie, if you're in the video game and you did the button and now you've got to go and find somebody, you do the fetch quest. Well, the fetch quest is the bit that you do. That is the bit that you have fun with, and that's the bit that you're fighting people on the way and all the rest of it. The cutscene in between is then sets up why you're doing the next bit. And obviously I think the trouble is the movie's just got all the bits of it, and the video game part is usually the bit that you enjoy. I mean, I'm currently playing Ghost of Tsushima, and that's that kind of open world video game where you've got to do fetch quests, and and you have this, and it's like if they turn that into a movie, the story to me doesn't feel generally enough to keep you warranted. But the gameplay loop, which doesn't. I think Prince of Persia is that kind of same thing. The gameplay loop is what keeps you playing. The story necessarily isn't the thing. And you're like, it's like they're all standing there and they're trying to get. And I was just like, yeah, okay. It just like, when you're playing a video game and you're coming up to you can feel the tension building in how quickly the scenes are coming. I recently was playing Final Fantasy VII, the remake, and you could tell the storyline was starting to pick up as the game was moving, just trying to move the story along. But at the same time, when it's going to do a fake out ending because they still got another 20 hours to go yet. But the movie kind of doesn't get that. It doesn't get that whole experience. And so this is why these like video game movies generally, other than I would say like Jumanji, they generally fail because they can't capture it properly.
Yeah, and part of what makes Jumanji work is it's actually not based on a video game. It's just a movie set within a video game. Obviously, we're talking about the more recent ones. There's another aspect to it, I think, as well. One of the big driving factors in games is the sense of progression, which can either be leveling up in a game like Final Fantasy VII or getting new equipment, like in a game like Prince of Persia or Assassin's Creed, where you get, as you play the game, you get cool new abilities that change how the game plays a little bit. Ghost of Tsushima, you get new sword styles. You have the overhead style that's good for going against shields, and another style for going against spears. You have additional weapons that you can pick up to use in combat, sticky bombs, kunai, etc. In a movie, you don't get that. The character might progress. Although they didn't in this one. He got his cool special ability right at the beginning and then never got anything else. But in movies, you do tend to have that progression. You go from this item, which you then kind of trade out to get another item. And by the end of the movie, you are much better equipped than you were But you as the viewer don't have the satisfaction of that progression. In a game, you're like, I am definitely stronger now than I was then. The movie is kind of like, oh, yeah. There you go.
Well, I think that's the thing. I mean, again, and I think this movie does have that issue of if you have played the games or if you are a gamer, I think you do look at these games. You might look at them maybe worse than someone that doesn't play games. You might look at them a bit different. I think, for example, like the recent Tomb Raider movie, I think that one did that was much more closer to the movie, but I think they did it kind of well enough on its own compared to the Angelina Jolie versions. I thought that was much more, but again,
they were also based on different versions of Tomb Raider as well. The Angelina Jolie was the more traditional. The relaunch hadn't happened yet, so we didn't have the grim and gritty.
Which I would say, all three of those games are very good and definitely worth checking out.
I haven't played the third one, but I did enjoy the first two. I will say the movie, the Tomb Raider movie, one thing I would point out about it is that although it is closer to the first of the remake games, it follows that storyline. It does kind of do this thing where you're like, the games very specifically have spiritual aspects to them. You interact with ghosts. There is a supernatural thing happening. The movie is very much, she was actually just kind of poisonous. She had a plague that she carried, and all the supernatural elements are completely removed, which I think kind of misses the point of the Tomb Raider adventure. It's like if they did Uncharted and there was no wall climbing or something.
Yeah, well, obviously right now they are out in Germany filming the Uncharted movie, so we'll be interested to see how this all goes in. And obviously, I think, as you say, as video game fans, we do like these. We always you're always like, are they any good? It's just like going in, your expectations, because Prince of Persia just proved again they're just very average. They just never get to that next level up. They never level up.
Nice. Honestly, the best video game movie is probably still Scott Pilgrim, which isn't even a video game. It's based on like an American style manga, but it has very video game elements to it. Even to the point where like, oh, he just beat up one of the boyfriends and a whole bunch of change popped out because, you get money for beating bad guys. Yeah, it's, I don't know. I'll take it back. Actually, the best video game of all time is Mario Brothers.
Oh, do you know what? I'm not kidding. I literally just brought that up because on Wikipedia, because that actually was distributed by Disney, and I'm really like going, why is this not on there? I was just looking. It actually,
if it comes onto the service, we're not doing.
Yeah, we're so doing this one because it was distributed by Buena Vista Pictures and was created by Hollywood Pictures. I want to, why is Super Mario Brothers not on Disney Plus? We need that one. I just remember that was awful. But nevertheless, let us know in the comments below if you've checked out Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Go check us out over at whatsondisneyplus.com. Like, follow, and subscribe. And we shall see you guys in another episode. Later.